Metallica VS Megadeth. Within metal and hard rock, there are very few other combinations of words with VS in between that are so ubiquitous. It's the Xbox versus PlayStation of metal. The only thing that even comes close is maybe Ozzy versus Dio. I'm surprised there isn't an episode of Epic Rap Battles of History yet. Anywhere you look where either band is mentioned, there's a good chance you'll find some passionate fan giving their unsolicited opinion of which thrash band rules them all, not counting all the other thrash bands. But of course, keep in mind that there's no such thing as an objective comparison for a pair of bands like this. I mean, the most objective thing is sales, and Metallica win that one by a wide margin. So all I can offer you is an opinion. An opinion that I should clarify has changed a couple of times. So if you ask me which thrash band I preferred at different parts of my life, you'd get different answers for different reasons. I can't stress enough that I love both bands, and this will be very hard for me, but I'll try my best. I think the first course of action is to determine who's the better guitar player, Dave Mustaine or Kirk Hammett. Dave made a huge stink about how Kirk basically ripped off his solos note for note, or didn't play them well enough and merely took a swing at them. And after listening to Dave's solos on the No Life to Leather demo and Kirk's solos on Kill 'Em All, Kirk is playing by and large the same solos. They have the same starts and end points, but he takes some different avenues to get there. As for what I prefer, I don't know if I can answer that. The Kirk versions of the solos are the ones I've heard millions of times, so they're ingrained into my brain. Whereas I can count the amount of times I've gone out of my way to listen to the No Life to Leather demo tape on one hand. But comparing both guitarists on their own merits, yeah, I like Dave Mustaine more. I feel Dave is far more consistent in his solos, whereas Kirk's modern solos are the definition of lazy. I mean, compare a solo from the last Metallica and Megadeth records, and they do all the talking. I also like Dave's riffs more than Kirk's. Dave grew up listening to a lot of R&B, and you can tell with the weird-ass tempos he uses for his riffs, which you never really hear much in the context of metal, especially in Megadeth's early days. He's far more creative in that regard. His rhythm playing is more complex than many of the greatest guitarists' leads. He's a freak of nature. But in the classic eras of both bands, I would say I prefer Kirk's solos. Even taking into account Kill 'Em All's solos are mostly Dave's. It's hard to believe now, but once upon a time, Kirk was great at elevating Metallica songs with his solos. One, Welcome Home Sanitarium, Disposable Heroes, The Unforgiven, Fight Fire with Fire, I can go on. And I've said this on more than one occasion, but Fades of Black is one of the all-time great guitar solos. Top 10 easily, if not higher. And it's my favorite guitar solo ever. It's dripping with emotion, soul, and heartbreak. Sure, there's more complex solos out there, but music is about expression, not complexity. I don't care that even back then he was a pentatonic madman. It fit the songs, and that's all that matters. Like Slayer's solos are objectively terrible. But they fit Slayer. It's all about playing to the song at the end of the day. And Dave's solos are great too. They have that same frantic energy that his riffs have, and again, they fit Megadeth to a T. Dave's solos are the stuff of legend as well, but I'd be lying if I said he wasn't often overshadowed in that regard by other guitar players he's had in Megadeth, like Marty Friedman or Chris Poland. They have their own strengths and weaknesses, and while I prefer Dave as a guitarist, make no mistake, Kirk is best suited for Metallica. Meanwhile, Dave works better in his own band. With how big that guy's head is, I can't imagine him working in Metallica longer than he did. As for vocals, it's pretty much a running joke that Dave Mustaine is not a good singer, even within Megadeth's fan base. And James Hetfield, in terms of being able to carry a tune, schools him 3 ways to Sunday. But like I said before, they both fit their respective bands. But I'll be lying if I said that Dave Mustaine's voice didn't get ear grating after a while. But James Hetfield adopted that annoying ass croon in the 90s, so he's not innocent either. I love both Dave's and James's vocals, and I like Hook and Mouth for the record. I was just trying to say that vocally they both have weaknesses, but at the end of the day, it fits the music, so I can't bitch too much. Now to compare the rhythm sections. For bass, Megadeth has had quite a few bass players over the years, but they all pale in comparison to Dave Ellefson. When you think of Megadeth bass player, you think of him. James Menza might be a nice guy and all, but come on. So it's Dave Ellefson versus 3 of the best bassists in all of metal. Woof. Cliff Burton is such a legend in how he led Metallica in the early days. His eclectic influences made him such a looming figure whose presence is still felt today within the band. He was far more unique in his phrasing, his tone, and how he wrote his lines. Meanwhile, Junior, as important as he was, musically, he was never like that for Megadeth. He was more like the Robin to Dave's Batman. And there's no shame in that. But compared to Cliff, come on, it ain't even fair. Cliff has stuff like Anesthesia, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Orion. Meanwhile, Ellefson has the Peace Sells bassline, which is definitely iconic, don't get me wrong, but it was also written by Dave Mustaine. Within Megadeth's 2 classic lineups, musically, he was kind of the weakest link, very much the Ringo or Michael Anthony of Megadeth. Undeniably important, but also undeniably less important than everybody else. There's a reason why people still go see Megadeth now, even after Ellefson did, and got himself kicked out. Compared to Jason, I think it's more of a fair fight. Jason never led the band, but he was a great cheerleader for Metallica, like how Junior was for Megadeth. And their playing styles are more comparable since they both play with a pick, and they're both way more adventurous in their early years. Seriously, listen to Doomsday for the Deceiver by Flotsam and Jetsam and the first 2 Megadeth records to see what those guys could do once upon a time, before simplifying things and, for the most part, following whatever the guitar was doing. I would say they're pretty much even. And Junior compared to Rob is weird because Trujillo is by far the better bass player, but his best work is not with Metallica. I often complain about how wasted that guy is on their records, and he just doesn't really have the same pedigree that Junior has, so I guess Ellefson takes this one almost by default, but it's not really fair, honestly. For drums, oh boy, this ain't even close. Look, I'm not a drummer. I can't do much more than a simple rock beat, but comparing Lars Ulrich to people like Gar Samuelson, Nick Menza, hell, even later people like Vinnie Colaiuta, Chris Adler, or Dirk Vierbraun, it's just not fair. Even compared to lesser drummers Davis had like Chuck Baylor and Sean Drover, Lars doesn't really stand a chance. But I'll give Lars some credit. The guy was super important to the band in terms of writing and arranging songs, and was just such a strong individual within the band to push them. And even as a drummer in the early days, Lars is no slouch. Was he Dave Lombardo? No, but he was perfect for those albums. Musically, he was the Ringo of the band. He had a certain swing to his parts that very few, if anyone, can really replicate. And he could also get technical as hell, like on tracks like Blackened, Fight Fire with Fire, or Battery. Seriously, if you listen to what Lars is doing on those tracks, you realize how important he was to the unique sound of Metallica. But still, he just can't compare it to people like Gar Samuelson and Nick Menza. Those guys were just gods among men. Gar for his jazzy, thrashing badness that gave Dave such a great kick in the ass. And Nick for his machine gun precision. The man was a machine. I have a hard time keeping up just listening to him. If I tried to play like him, I'm reasonably sure that my arms would fall off.
Hey, how you doing? Hope you're enjoying the video. It's brought to you by me, my Patreon, and YouTube memberships. For as little as $1.75 USD a month, you can support the channel, help me grow, and get benefits like content like this early, your name in videos, and even the occasional exclusive video. So check it out, and I thank you in advance. Enjoy the video.
But the albums. Who do I think made the best albums? Well, I know who made the most albums. Yeah, funnily enough, despite forming 2 years later and the fact that they were broken up for a couple years in the early 2000s, Megadeth have 16 studio albums compared to Metallica's 11. Megadeth were one of the most consistent thrash bands for a while in terms of releasing new material. Every 2 or 3 years, they would have a new record. That is, however, until their 2016 album Dystopia, because after that it took them 6 years to release their last album, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. Meanwhile, Metallica really make you wait for the new albums. It's kind of funny how Rob Trujillo is by far their longest serving bass player, being in the band for almost 20 years now, and he somehow only played on 3 studio albums. But Metallica's also done weird stuff, like the 2 S&M albums, and the 598 EP and Garage Inc. album that are chock full of covers. So I guess that's something to consider. So as well as comparing album by album, I'll also compare them by eras. And trust me, there's a lot of parallels. First up, the classic thrash period. The first 4 albums by each band. They both have their debuts that are incredibly rough around the edges in terms of production, but they both have songs that more than make up for it. Some people don't like these albums, but in my mind and the minds of many others, they're quintessential thrash. They both have an album that is a bit of an ugly duckling, the production is lacking especially in the bottom ends, but not in a lo-fi way like their debuts. It just sounds like there was a major issue with the mixing. Not all the songs are amazing, but there's still a lot of classic stuff, with a ballad serving as one of the big highlights on each record. And each band have 2 bona fide masterpieces each. A lot of bands are lucky to even have 1 album approaching the level of these records, but Metallica and Megadeth somehow caught lightning in a bottle twice. You can pick any of these records as their best, and I can't even argue. The sounds on these albums are impeccable, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a dud. I know some people don't like songs like Escape or I Ain't Superstitious, but they both serve a purpose on their respective albums. I would say I prefer Kill 'Em All to Killing Is My Business. The production has a better defined bottom end and a richer sound quality. The songs are catchier, and you can tell Metallica had a knack for writing anthems from the very beginning. It's just a more well-rounded album. Every riff is iconic. It's the sound of a war being waged against the glam bands of the time. A war Metallica would end up winning. But at the same time, Killing Is My Business is nothing to sneeze at. Dave wants us to play faster and heavier than Metallica, and he did. It's a blistering half an hour of thrash. You'd be hard-pressed to find many other albums outside the first wave of black metal to be this visceral, but nothing is ever lost in translation. Megadeth in a lot of ways were much better musicians than their contemporaries. Drummer Garth Samuelson and lead guitarist Chris Poland were both jazz musicians, so as much as a cacophonic barrage this record is, it's still controlled chaos. So I can totally see why someone might like it better than Kill 'Em All. It's not a better or worse thing, it just comes down to what you prefer, and I prefer Kill 'Em All. Oh, and as for Mechanics versus Four Horsemen, probably doesn't surprise you, but yeah, I prefer the Four Horsemen. I think the lyrics are better, and I like the slow Sweet Home Alabama section and the solo that Kirk added. Though it's slower and nowhere near as cutthroat as Mechanics. Which is something Dave will never let you forget.
Okay, that's their way. This is our way.
And Justice for All versus So Far, So Good, So What is tough for many of the same reasons. But again, I'll go with Metallica because I prefer the running motif or theme of this album being justice, war, the environment, and politics. Yes, this album is deeply political. Songs like Blackened, Eye of the Beholder, and the title track speak for themselves. Also, this record showed Metallica pushing themselves to be even more technical in their approach to songwriting, which is why there's a bunch of funky time signatures on this record and a bunch of really cool, weird solos and riffs. My biggest complaint is the fact that some songs definitely go on too long. Some tracks feel kinda samey, and of course, there's no bass at all. Some say for these reasons alone, So Far So Good So What is the better record, but let's not forget that that album isn't exactly the best produced Megadeth record either. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a good record too, but it's kind of just another Megadeth album. There's some amazing songs, but So Far So Good doesn't give you much reason to listen to it over other Megadeth LPs. Production-wise, it's thin, tinny, and compressed, but compared to Injustice, it may as well be Pet Sounds. Their cover of Anarchy in the UK leaves a lot to be desired, and until the mid-90s, this is definitely the lamest thing they ever put to tape. Sure, it's better than Motley Crue's version, but that's not saying much. There's also classic tracks like Mary Jane, Liar, Set the World Afire, and In My Darkest Hour, which is my favorite Megadeth song in case you care to know. So again, it's close, but Metallica takes this one. And Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets versus Peace Cells and Rust in Peace. Damn, this one hurts. These are all albums I'll happily take to my grave, but I think I have to go with Megadeth. I can put either Peace Cells or Rust in Peace on at any time, have a blast, and never even think about looking at my watch, whereas I think I'm ever so slightly burnt out on a couple of songs from Master and Ride the Lightning. I've just heard them so many times, but I stress, this is ridiculously close. These are both perfectly performed and produced albums. Ride and Master have this great apocalyptic atmosphere. Meanwhile, Peace Cells and Rust in Peace also have great atmospheres and nudge out Metallica in terms of musicianship, in my opinion. Say what you want about Dave, but he knows how to pick a good band to support him. Rust in particular is just a massively crafted record. It's not controlled chaos like some previous Megadeth records, but it's laser precise and an absolute audio assault. But the same can be said for Master of Puppets. The whole album is a journey that goes in so many different directions. You can listen to it a million times and always find something new. Lest we forget, Peace Cells and Ride the Lightning are also magnificent for many of the same reasons Rust in Peace and Master of Puppets are. Like I said, this is ridiculously close. I've written and erased this paragraph twice now because I've had such a hard time deciding. So in my heart, it's more like a draw. But for the sake of the video, I'll choose Megadeth. As for the eras of both bands when they start changing and adapting their sound, again we have 4 records each. For Metallica, we have from the Black Album to Saint Anger, and for Megadeth, we have from Countdown to Extinction to Risk. And yeah, I don't need to think very hard about this one, Megadeth easily clears. The only true comparison that makes me think for even a second is Countdown versus the Black Album. Both are great, and I've had to somewhat make up with the Black Album over the past few years after growing a distaste for it during my edgy thrasher phase of my teenage years, but it's a great metal record. It's not the best Metallica album of all time, sure, but I can't think of any album that's gotten more people into heavier music than this one, because it's amazingly produced, so a normie's baby ears that would explode trying to listen to a band like Venom can listen to it. It's commercial, but not to a fault. It's in a great Goldilocks position. Besides, Nothing Else Matters, I never liked that song. But the other radio songs are great, if a little played out. And the deep cuts like Holier Than Thou, A Wolf and Man, My Friend of Misery, and The God That Failed help make this album such a vital piece of not just metal history, but music history. But Countdown to Extinction, in my opinion, keeps Megadeth's spirits more alive in the commercial context. Dave's voice has gotten better, but he's still Dave. It's not like the Black Album, because James's voice was never the same after recording that album. It's still quite edgy with songs like Captive Honor, Skin on My Teeth, and Sweating Bullets, but there's also songs that, dare I say it, feel downright mature, with tracks about social inequality like Foreclosure of a Dream, and the title track attacking trophy hunters and the states of the environment and where it was going. As for Load and Reload, yeah, these albums suck. Just boring, generic sounding alternative rock. Sure, there's some brief moments of southern rock, country, and dare I say it's even a little bit of metal here or there. But they're so few and far between, it doesn't even matter. And I'll admit that there's some good stuff here. I like Until It Sleeps, King Nothing, Devil's Dance, Unforgiven 2, and Where the Wild Things Are. So out of 27 tracks on both albums, I liked 5 of them. You don't need to be a math whiz to know that isn't a great batting average. Sure, not every other song is outright bad, but a lot of them are. And the mid songs piss me off even more because many of them could have been really good too. It feels like Bob Rock was really slacking off during this time. Now the album still sounds pretty good, he didn't drop the ball in that aspect. But a lot of these songs and performances are first draft at best. He should have put his foot down and said, "You guys are Metallica. Why does it feel like I'm in the studio with a wannabe Alice in Chains?" Meanwhile, Youthanasia and Cryptic Writings are pretty good albums and quite underrated in my opinion. Granted, they're not as good as some of the prior Megadeth albums, but for a quote-unquote sellout, these albums could be much worse. Granted, Youthanasia is more like Countdown Part 2, so we're kinda starting to get to the point where album by album comparison doesn't really work, so please forgive me here, I'm doing my best. It's also produced, or co-produced I should say, by Max Norman, so it still sounds great, especially Nick Menza's drums. I'm honestly really surprised coming back to this because besides a few tracks, this album never really grabs me much back in the day, so I never listened to it a whole lot. But Youthanasia is nothing to sleep on. It's maybe a little lighter in the loafers with tracks like A Tout Le Monde or I Thought I Knew It All, but even those tracks are really good. Lest we forget Reckoning Day, Train of Consequences, Addicted to Chaos, Blood of Heroes, Black Curtains, so many good tracks. I highly recommend this album if you haven't listened to it already. Cryptic Writings is a downgrade from Youthanasia, definitely, but I like this album too. This is the first album with Dan Huff, and they're chasing radio with the singles, but besides some songs, it's not too different from the two albums that preceded it. And even the singles are good commercial rock songs. Trust is stupid catchy, and so is The Secret Place. Though Almost Honest is a huge turd, and being the second track on this record does this album no favors at all. Seriously, this song is up there with the worst of 90s Metallica. But besides that and the Pretty Dumb Mastermind, this album is a decent to good alternative rock/metal record. It gets kinda weird with tracks like Have Cool Will Travel, Sin, and I'll Get Even. They even get thrashy on the Disintegrators and Fight for Freedom, or as it's written on the album, Fight for freedom, fight authority, fight for anything. Megadeth win this round by a wide margin. All my homies hate Load and Reload. As for Saint Anger and Risk, there are no winners here. Abandon hope, all ye who enter. They have their reputations for a very good reason. They're boring at best and irritating at worst. If you ever want to recreate the sound of nails on a chalkboard on Spotify, then feel free to listen to the entire 7 minutes of Shoot Me Again. Shoot me again, shoot me again, come on, shoot me again, shoot me again, shoot me again, shoot me again, come on. People rightfully so rip on Lars' snare drum or James's vocal performance, but not enough people talk about the awful guitar tone on this thing. And I'm by no means a tone snob. In fact, quote-unquote bad guitar tone can work depending on the context, but St. Anger's guitars sound so flubby and undefined. It almost sounds like they're using amp sims with no IRs. I expect better from this band. What were they doing? As for Risk, its worst crime is being incredibly boring and sounding like a shadow of the band who recorded even Cryptic Writings. So with that, and the fact that it's quite a bit shorter so I don't need to suffer as long, I guess I'll give Megadeth the win here. But I stress, it is not an honorable win. There's not even one single track on either album I would classify as good. They both have one decent track though. Risk has The Doctor Is Calling, which is kinda cool, and St. Anger has The Unnamed Feeling, which is interesting, and hey, is that Edward Furlong? But they're just decent. And they're only decent when compared to the rest of the tracks on their respective albums. If either of these songs were on better records in either band's catalog, they wouldn't be worth taking a second look at. Now the heirs of both bands returning to their roots and going back to thrash like God intended. And this is where the album by album comparison just doesn't work anymore, because Metallica have released 3 records during this time, and Megadeth have released 7. So you might think based on that fact alone that Megadeth clears here as well. Yeah, not really. I have to give this one to Metallica, believe it or not. They've been relatively consistent. Sure, Death Magnetic is Brickwall to Hell and Back. Sure, the second half of Hardwired is largely made up of forgettable filler. And sure, 72 Seasons makes me kinda sad. But they were never on the level of something like Super Collider or The World Needs a Hero. Death Magnetic has some cool tracks. Broken Beat and Scarred, All Nightmare Long, and Cyanide are all really enjoyable if you ask me. The first side of Hardwired I still think is a good time. The title track is the most visceral Metallica's been since the 80s. Atlas Rise has that signature Metallica sense of scale. Moth Into Flame has a hell of an anthemic chorus with some tasty harmonized leads, and even though the second side is incredibly dull, it at least ends with the best Metallica song since maybe Blackened. I'm not lying, guys, Spit at the Bone is that good. Metallica have written a lot of longer songs than the latter part of their career, but this is one of very few songs I can say that earns its track length. It has an intensity and atmosphere that reminds me of tracks like Disposable Heroes, Fight Fire with Fire, and Damaged Inc. It's songs like this that make me feel disappointed when I hear tracks off 72 Seasons because I know that even this far into their career that Metallica can do much better than what they usually crank out. Speaking of 72 Seasons, I still think it's quite mid overall. There's simply not much here worth getting attached to in my opinion. I like some tracks like Chasing Lights and Room of Mirrors a bit more than I did the first time I heard it, and this is the best James has sounded in years. He never sounded bad, but it sounds like his voice has a new lease on life in this record. I'll give it that. But the fact that Metallica's longest song ever that ends the album is so lackluster still leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. Though I'll say this, Lux Eterna I still think is great, barring that solo, and it beats anything I heard from that last Megadeth record still. As for Dave Mustaine and the Megadeths, it's on the rough side, I can't lie here. I loathe The World Needs a Hero and Super Collider. The former I almost dislike more than Risk. At least Risk could be kind of entertaining at points, but this album is just boring, forgettable thrash that has songwriting from Dave Mustaine, who seems to have forgotten how to write interesting riffs and solos. What the hell happened here? Lest we forget some awful cuts like the worst attempt at a throwback I've ever heard with Return to Hangar and Moto Psycho, which is up there with the worst of Risk. And Super Collider isn't the worst thing, I guess, but the fact that they're still somehow capable of a misstep this big, this late in the game, when Risk happened almost a decade prior is mind-boggling. Who wants to hear Megadeth record generic dad rock? And the rest of the albums are all pretty much the same. They're all acceptable, sure, but highly overrated. If you've heard one of these albums, you've heard them all. They're reminiscent of what Overkill has been doing since the 90s. There's some good tracks though. Blackmail the Universe from The System Has Failed, Despite the Lyrics, the title track from United Abominations, This Day We Fight from Endgame, Sudden Death from 13, Poisonous Shadows from Dystopia, and Junkie from The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. I think you can make a decent record or two out of all the songs on these albums, but listening to them all the way through is a tad painful, I'll be honest. They get so samey and tiring after a while. It's a real shame because Megadeth records used to be so much more varied with song structures that Dave would use. I remember the last time I listened to Endgame, I was pulling my hair out by the end. I was not having any fun. I can see they're not outright awful, and I can see why some people may appreciate the consistency of these albums. But to me, they're largely a tepid listening experience. The best of these records, in my opinion, is Dystopia, though that might be because I remember being really excited for that album to come out, and I really loved it at the time, even though it hasn't aged well at all. If you want a newer Megadeth album to listen to, I would recommend that one. It doesn't help that Dave's vocals over the years has somehow gotten worse, but I won't knock him too much because he went through some bad medical problems in the 2000s, mainly throat cancer, and it's Megadeth. His voice is still fine enough, it works. What doesn't work is the rapid decline in quality of Dave's riffs. Very few of them are memorable, and even worse, a lot of them sound the same. And the political commentary has now become quite dreadful. Even though Dave's political songs used to be among the band's best, you could tell he had a pretty good idea of what he was talking about, but now he has the political understanding of your drunk uncle yelling at CNN. It's never anything substantial. It's all Pirates of the People, the big bad elite are being big and bad, and Obama is the Antichrist. Also, gays don't deserve rights apparently. And I could almost forgive it if there were at least well-written lyrics. But Dave, what are you doing here, dude? In the 2000s, Dave became a born-again Christian, and ever since his lyrics really took a hit. And I usually don't care about an artist's religion because it's usually not very relevant, and when it is relevant, sometimes the lyrics that come from a religious perspective can be quite insightful. But Dave not only will not shut up about his religion, but he's now also the exact opposite of insightful. He was never Bob Dylan, he was never subtle, even at the best of times. But current Megadeth lyrics like America Stan makes Holy Wars look like holy scripture. The moment I lost faith in Dave Mustaine ever writing good lyrics again is when I found out that he named the 2009 album Endgame after the Alex Jones film of the same name.
Okay, so this video was originally released 2 years ago, and since then Megadeth released their final self-titled album and announced a farewell tour. And my god, this new album is maybe the weakest out of their whole re-thrash period. We jump back and forth between the same standard Megadeth thrashers we've heard for years and years ad nauseum, to oddly enough songs that sound like homages to their 90s output. Obey the Call, a song I actually like for the record, apes Angry Again really badly. I Don't Care sounds like something from the last Blink-182 album. The Final Note is a pitiful way for this band to go out, boring, plodding, mid-tempo, not what I want from any Megadeth song, let alone their last wholly original song. And Ride the Lightning, technically a bonus track, but it's pretty much the final song. Dave says it brings everything full circle, but to me, it's just kind of pathetic. It's basically the same song, but with worse vocals, worse production. Oh, but it's ever so slightly faster, so I guess that makes up for it. God. Even on what should be Megadeth's victory lap, Dave once again cucks himself. I'm not gonna lie, man, it's really lame. I'm seeing the band this year open for Iron Maiden, and I'll gladly go see them headline as well to pay my respects for a man who has made some of the greatest music of all time, but unfortunately, this album just leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, so that was an unfortunate note to end that portion of the video on. I apologize. But whom do I prefer overall? I do prefer Megadeth. Through everything. Because of that decision Lars, Cliff, and James made, we now have 2 kick-ass legendary metal bands instead of 1. Hey guys, thanks for making it all the way to the end. Tell me what band you prefer in the comments and why. Just don't be a dick about it and try to be civil. That's all I ask. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so my listening to Megadeth's last album wasn't for nothing. But anyways...
What, no warning? No second chance? No!